Welcome, dear listeners, to Whispers in the Dark, where shadows tell stories and the night breathes secrets. I'm the Dark Skald, your guide through the unknown, your storyteller in the darkness, weaving tales that will haunt your thoughts long after the last word fades. Here we embrace the eerie, the unsettling, the stories that lurk just beyond the edge of the firelight. So settle in, dim the lights, and listen closely. The darkness has something to say. So let's begin this daunting tale, The Horseman's Sword. They said the fog in Dreadmere came alive in November, not in the ordinary way mist clings to riverbanks or drifts over fields. No, this fog moved with purpose, curled around chimneys and crept through alleys, pressing against locked doors like something searching. The elders of Dreadmere said it came from the forest to the north, Blackpine Grove, where the trees grew too close, and the ground never thawed. And when the fog came thickest, the stories said he followed. The hooded horseman. Every child in Dreadmere had heard the tale, a faceless rider on a monstrous black steed, eyes burning red as coal, sword across his back, hunting the sinful by scent. The horseman was no ordinary ghost. He didn't haunt a single place. He haunted guilt. And guilt was never in short supply in Dreadmere. Mira Lorne always thought the stories were exaggerated. She grew up hearing them from her grandfather while he drank his way through long, cold nights. Cauldron Moor, he'd spit, naming the man the horseman once was. Knight-turned betrayer, burned his own chapel for silver, killed kin for coin. Now he rides, bound to blood and vengeance. Then he'd fall silent, lost in his own shadows. But Mira had never seen the horseman, not in 17 years, not once. Still, she obeyed the rules. Everyone did. Never walk the forest road after sundown, never look into the fog when it speaks, and never, ever say the rider's name aloud. It was late when Mira left the bakery that evening. She'd stayed to help old Mare clean soot from the ovens and bind cloth over the broken windows. Business had been slow since the early frost, and folks were becoming tight with their coin. Still, Ma insisted Mira take a loaf for her trouble. "Go quick, girl," the old woman said, eyes darting to the mist rolling in outside. "It's a fog-thick night." The fog had returned 3 nights ago and hadn't left since. Outside, the village had quieted to a hush. Lamps glowed faintly through the fog, yellow-orange orbs floating in the haze. Doors were shut, windows shuttered. Even the dogs, usually howling at anything that moved, had gone still. Dreadmere didn't fear beasts or brigands. It feared the fog. Mira clutched the warm loaf to her chest and walked fast, heels echoing faintly on the cobbles. Her home lay on the far side of the village, past the square and up a small hill where the chapel ruins sat like broken teeth in the mist. A quicker path ran through the forest's edge past Blackpine Grove, but no one took it, not at night. As she reached the square, she saw the notice board had been torn down again. A fresh sign had been nailed up in its place, crudely scrawled in red. "The dead still ride. Stay inside." She paused. A chill crawled over her neck. The fog moved oddly here, coiling not like air but like something aware, as if testing her resolve. She turned away and kept walking, breath quickening. Her boots slipped on the moss-slick stones. Halfway up the hill she saw the old chapel. It had been gutted by fire long ago. Some claimed it was lightning, others whispered darker things. All that remained were scorched stone walls, a collapsed steeple, and the blackened bell that hadn't rung in over a century. No one went near it anymore, not since the last priest went mad and hanged himself from the iron hook where the bell rope used to be. Mira hurried past it. Something moved in the fog behind her. She stopped, heart thudding, listened. Nothing but the faint rustle of dead leaves. But then, tap, tap. She turned sharply, only missed. But her eyes caught movement just for a moment near the chapel's archway. A ripple in the fog like someone ducking behind a pillar. She stared, frozen. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. She backed away slowly, then turned and bolted the last 100 yards to her door. Her father, Callan, was already inside, a half bottle of sourberry wine on the table and a fire struggling in the hearth. "Gods, Mira," he snapped, rising. "You're late." "Old Mare needed help," she panted, locking the door behind her. "The ovens were..." She paused. "The chapel. I think I saw... someone." Callan's face paled. He stepped toward her, voice lowered. "Did they see you?" "Who?" I don't know. It was just fog, I think, but it felt wrong." He exhaled and reached for the wine. His hand trembled. "Dad?" she asked. "What aren't you telling me?" He said nothing, just drank deeply and sat back down. Mira placed the bread on the table. Her hand still shook. "The stories," she whispered, "about the Horseman. Are they true?" He flinched. Then slowly he looked her in the eyes. "You think we built our houses this close to the forest by choice? That we let that chapel rot instead of rebuilding it out of laziness? That the bells stopped because we lost the rope?" She stared. He leaned in, his voice barely audible. "That fog comes when something's restless. Not just the Horseman, but other things. Worse even. The fog is a warning." Mira's throat tightened. "But why now?" Callan looked at the fire, eyes haunted. "Because someone brought guilt back into this village." He didn't elaborate. He never did. But Mira knew enough to guess. Her father had fled the war 20 years ago. Said he'd watched good men burn for bad reasons. He never talked about what he did to survive. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the fire in her hearth long since gone cold. Outside, the fog swirled against the glass. At some point she thought she heard something, whispers maybe, faint, just at the edge of hearing, like voices underwater, calling her name. She pulled the covers over her ears and squeezed her eyes shut. She dreamed of the chapel burning, of a bell ringing where no rope hung, and of red eyes glowing in the smoke. Elsewhere, in the forest, the mist thickened between the trees of Blackpine Grove. On the old path that led from the village to the chapel, hoarfrost crept up twisted roots. The wind was dead. And beneath a rotted oak something stirred. A patch of ground buckled, leaves scattered. From the cold, wet earth a skeletal hand reached up, fingers wrapped around the hilt of a buried sword. The fog whispered. The rider did not rise, not yet, but soon. The fog didn't lift by morning. It never did in November, but this time was worse. By dawn, it had swallowed the entire village of Dreadmere. From Mira's bedroom window, the world outside was a void, white, thick and pulsing like a living thing. There were no sounds of carts, no market bells, not even birdsong. Silence ruled. Mira sat hunched at the edge of her bed, still in yesterday's clothes, fingers trembling over a chipped mug of tea gone cold. She hadn't told her father about the voice she heard in the night, or the dream, or the red eyes. But the image haunted her like a smudge burned into her vision. She decided to go to the chapel ruins again, not out of courage, but compulsion. Something pulled at her, like a string wound around her ribs. She left quietly without waking Callan. The air outside bit like knives. She kept to the middle of the path, boots crunching frost as she passed empty houses. Shutters were latched, curtains drawn. Every home she passed felt like a tomb, sealed against some great fear. The fog drifted between doors and over rooftops, as if tasting them, searching. The chapel ruins emerged like a shipwreck from the white sea. It was worse up close. The stones were blacker than she remembered, not just from fire, but something else. Rot, maybe. And there were symbols carved into them she'd never seen before. Jagged things, angular, not words but warnings. She stepped into the archway. The scent hit her like a slap. Damp ash, rotted meat, and something sharp, like iron and lightning. And then she saw the grave. It hadn't been there the day before. A single fresh mound of dirt behind the chapel. No marker, no cross, just disturbed earth. Mira stared at it, cold crawling up her legs. Her mouth was dry. Her instincts screamed, "Turn around, run." But her feet carried her forward. There was something sticking out of the soil. Not a flower, not a branch, a bone. She took a step closer, and the earth beneath it twitched. She froze. The mound pulsed once, then again, slowly, like something breathing. A faint hiss escaped the ground. Impossible, like a whisper made by something with no lungs. She turned and fled. She didn't speak a word of it to her father that day, nor the next. But she wasn't the only one who had seen something. Whispers spread through the village like rot in the walls. A dog had been found dead near the grove, its body twisted, eyes gouged out, all four legs broken backward. Someone said old Merrick, the gravedigger, vanished, just gone, with his shack splintered and the ground behind it churned as if a dozen hooves had torn it apart. His shovel was found sticking upright in the soil, impaled through the skull of a deer. Father Grath, the priest of the new chapel, stopped holding services. When Mira passed him in the square, he muttered to himself and flinched at his own shadow. People started whispering the name again. The Horseman, always in a hush, never near open doors. Then, on the 5th night after the fog returned, Mira heard hoofbeats. It began just past midnight. She was already awake. Sleep had become a stranger. The dreams kept coming, flashes of flame, the burning chapel, and a scream she never remembered starting. But this time, she heard something real. Clip, clop, clip. Faint, but unmistakable. Hoof on stone, not trotting, not galloping, patrolling. She sat up in bed, heart hammering, eyes wide. She held her breath. The sound came again, closer. Clip, clop. She slipped from bed and padded to the window. What she saw did not feel possible. The fog had parted in a thin corridor down the main road, just enough to see something. A horse, black as the space between stars, its eyes glowing red, moving slow, deliberate. It made no steam in the cold, no breath, just eyes like burning pits. Its hooves never quite touched the ground, and on its back sat a figure, cloaked, towering, head bowed beneath a deep hood. A sword, a broadsword, massive and ancient, was strapped to his back, its hilt twisted with chains and runes that shimmered faintly like old blood. Mira covered her mouth. He wasn't looking toward her. He wasn't looking anywhere. But she felt him see her, as though her soul had been pinned in place, as though her guilt had been read, page by page, by something with no mercy left in it. Then the fog swallowed him again, and the hoofbeats faded. The next morning, Dreadmere was awake before dawn. Word had spread. Laura the midwife had vanished. No sign of struggle, only blood trailing from her porch to the middle of the road. There, villagers found her shawl, neatly folded, and a single hoofprint scorched into the stone, as if from molten iron. Father Grath finally spoke that day. In the square, voice quivering, he told them, "The Horseman rides again. The seal of Moor has been broken. We must confess our sins, lest he find them first." No one laughed. That night Mira sat with her father by the fire. She didn't eat, neither did he. They didn't speak, until at last she said quietly, "I saw him." Callan looked at her slowly. "In the fog," she continued. "Last night, I didn't dream it. I saw the horse." After a moment he whispered, "Did he look at you?" "No," she lied. He nodded, but she saw his hands trembling. He stood and walked to the hearth, pulled something from behind the woodpile, a small rusted box. From it he retrieved a folded map, a silver medallion, and a letter sealed in wax black as tar. "What is that?" Mira asked. "The truth," he said, eyes haunted. "Or what's left of it." He dropped the letter into the fire. The wax didn't melt. It screamed. Outside, the fog thickened once more, and somewhere in the trees hooves broke earth. The rider turned his head. He had felt it, a name spoken, a bloodline awakened, a sin returned. The sword hummed, and the hunt resumed. The next body was found just after sunrise. Gareth Tomlinson, the cooper's son, barely 17. A good boy, quiet, always helping his mother in the shop. He'd been delivering barrels late to the tavern and never returned home. They found him in the chapel ruins. His body was laid out like a ritual, arms stretched wide, eyes open and filled with dirt. His tongue had been torn out and nailed to the chapel wall. His boots were missing. His footprints, bloody and bare, led in from the forest, but not back out. Mira stood at the edge of the scene with the rest of the village, faces pale and silent. No one cried. No one moved closer than a few paces. Someone had whispered the word, "Sacrifice." Father Grath clutched a Bible in his shaking hands. "This is the work of judgment," he said. "His sword returns for the unrepentant." Mira's hands were clenched into fists. Her stomach churned, but not from grief, from recognition. She had dreamed of this exact image 2 nights ago. Gareth, the chapel, the blood on the stones, the fire, the scream. It hadn't been imagination. It had been a warning, and she had done nothing. Back home, Mira confronted her father. "What did you do?" she snapped, slamming the kitchen table. "What did you bring back with you?" Callan didn't look up. He sat by the hearth, eyes fixed on the burned medallion, now hanging from his fingers. It was old, silver tarnished black, etched with a knight kneeling before a hooded figure. Around the edges were the words, "Judicium sanguinis," judgment of blood. "I fought in the Ebon War," he said quietly, "but not just for our king. We did things under a different banner, a secret pact. I was part of the Pale Order." Mira froze. The Pale Order was whispered in history books, knights who had taken oaths not to defend, but to destroy. Hunters of the corrupted, executioners of the impure. They were said to wield ancient rights, powers buried long before the kingdoms rose. "You bound yourself to him," she whispered. "To the Horseman." "No." Callan's voice broke. "But we invoked him. We called on his sword." He stood, eyes wild. "There was a massacre at Red Hollow. We were outnumbered. Our commander, Sir Moore, took the oath. He called the Horseman, made a blood pact. Mira backed away. And it worked," he said. "We won. We slaughtered every last one, but it was never meant to stop. The Horseman doesn't just kill enemies. He follows guilt. It never ends." He turned to her, haunted. "I deserted. I buried the medallion. I changed our name, but it wasn't enough," Mira whispered. Callan nodded. "He's found me. Found us." The room fell into silence. Outside, the wind picked up, and for the first time in days, the fog shifted direction, rolling toward the house like a tide. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She packed a bag. Food, a blade, the burned map her father had tried to destroy. She studied the letter he'd tossed in the flames. It hadn't turned to ash. It simply darkened, curling at the edges like it was still smouldering inside. She knew now. She couldn't stay in Dreadmere. The Horseman was a curse stitched into her bloodline. The longer she remained, the more people would die. She had to find the original seal, the place where the pact was first made, and unmake it, if such a thing was even possible. She crept from the house just past midnight. Her father was asleep in the chair, breathing shallowly, hands still wrapped around the medallion like a ward. The fog was thicker than ever, opaque and buzzing faintly, like a hive of bees. But she didn't get far. Just beyond the chapel ruins, near the forest edge, she found more footprints, bare, bleeding, dragging one foot. They led toward Blackpine Grove. Mira knew she should turn back, but she followed. The forest was a wound stitched with trees. Blackpine Grove didn't feel natural. The pines were too close, bark oozing dark sap, needles curling in unnatural spirals. The air smelled of old iron and smoke. It wasn't long before she heard the sound again. Clip, clop, clip. Slow, relentless. Then another sound, breathing, but not from a living throat. It sounded like someone trying to breathe through a crushed windpipe, wet and ragged. A groan bubbled up through the fog, and Mira dropped low behind a tree. She saw him, the hooded Horseman, clearer now, closer. The black steed's eyes poured red smoke, and every hoofstep scorched the earth to ash. The rider's cloak moved like it was alive, flickering at the edges like shadow in firelight. No face beneath the hood, only darkness, deeper than night. And the sword, gods, the sword. It sang with a low hum like a funeral bell. The Horseman stopped. His head turned slightly. He sniffed the air. Mira's heart thudded. She pressed a hand over her mouth to silence her breathing. She could feel it, the pull of guilt dragging her toward him like gravity. She wanted to step out, to confess, to kneel. And just as she felt herself slipping forward, something snapped behind her. A branch. She spun. A boy, maybe 12, mud-covered, terrified. She'd seen him before, Oren, the tanner's son. "No," she hissed, but it was too late. The Horseman turned sharply. His sword rose. The boy screamed, and the fog devoured him. Mira watched in horror as a spray of blood arced through the mist, bright red against the pale white, and was absorbed into the air like ink in water. Then silence. The horseman vanished into the trees, leaving only scorched footprints. Oren was gone. Mira stumbled back to Dreadmere in a daze. She vomited behind the bakery and collapsed in the alley, sobbing. Not just for the boy, for herself, for everyone. This curse wasn't just killing soldiers, it was hunting anyone in reach, and she had led it here. That morning, she told Callan everything. The horseman's appearance, Oren's death, the chapel dreams, the bloody footprints. Her guilt spilled out like wine on stone. Her father was silent for a long time. Then he said, "There's one way left." He opened the map. There, deep in the Old Kingdom lands, was a place circled in wax-black ink, the Hollow Seal, the place where Samor had first summoned the Horseman, where the pact had begun. "It's a death sentence," Callan said. "I'd rather face death than bring it here," Mira said. "I'll go." As they packed, Mira caught a final glimpse of the forest. The fog was bleeding red now, and in its heart she saw fire, not flame, eyes, watching, waiting. The hunt had begun. The cursed lands began beyond the Ridge of Morn, a place where the sun no longer rose. They crossed it on foot, Mira and her father, bundled against the wind that howled like it remembered names. The trees here grew twisted, bark blackened and split open like infected wounds. Nothing lived in the soil, not birds, not insects. Even rot refused to settle in the dead leaves. The path wound downward through valleys carved by centuries of weeping. According to Callan, they were headed toward the heart of an ancient battlefield, the place where the Pale Order first called the Horseman from the abyss. Mira felt the land grow colder with every step. And on the third night, the stars vanished, not clouded, gone. The sky became a dull bruise, sagging low. The fog no longer drifted but hung motionless, suspended in the air like cobwebs spun by ghosts. Fires refused to catch. The trees leaned in as if to listen, and something else followed them. They never saw it, but they heard it. A dragging sound, not footsteps, something like chains over rock or claws on bone. Once, Mira turned and saw a flash of white in the trees. Not light, not eyes, teeth. Too many. All grinning. She didn't tell her father. On the fifth day, they reached it. The Hollow Seal. The land ended in a shallow basin, encircled by dead trees whose trunks had fused into one another, forming a wall like a cage. Inside, at the centre of the clearing, lay a stone altar half buried in moss and cracked open like a broken tomb. There was no wind here, no sound, no time. Carved into the altar was the sigil Mira had seen on the medallion, the kneeling knight before the hooded figure, surrounded by symbols that burned if she looked at them too long. The sword was etched into the stone, bleeding from its own hilt, and beneath it, in jagged Latin, "Unus debet mori pro peccatis omnium." One must die for the sins of all. Callan stepped forward, voice barely a whisper. This is where Samor made the pact. This is where he gave up his soul. Can we undo it? Mira asked. I don't know, he said, but it's where it ends. One way or another. That night, they made camp at the edge of the seal. Mira dreamed of blood again, but this time it was her own. She saw herself on the altar, sword driven through her chest, fog curling from her mouth like smoke, and the horseman stood above her, unmoving, watching. She woke to silence. Callan was gone. The fire was dead. The fog inside the seal was rising. She found him at the altar, kneeling, hands resting on the stone like a penitent. "Father," she whispered, What are you doing?" He didn't turn. "I made the pact," he said softly, "even if I didn't speak the words." I followed some more. I raised the sword. I carried the blood home with me. "You ran," Mira said. "You tried to stop it." "Blood doesn't forgive," he whispered. "It only waits." From the trees behind them, hoofbeats. Slow, certain, unstoppable, clip, clop, clip. Mira turned, eyes wide. The horseman stepped into the seal. The black steed pawed the ground, steamless breath curling from flared nostrils. The red eyes glowed brighter than ever before, and the sword shimmered on the rider's back with the thirst of a blade that remembered every soul it had ever taken. The fog didn't enter the seal. It bowed. Callan stood slowly, turning to face the horseman. "I invoke the right of substitution," he said. "I offer my soul. Take it and release hers." The horseman dismounted. It didn't walk. It glided. The sword came free with a shriek, dragging shadows behind it. The air cracked. The trees trembled. Mira screamed, but her voice made no sound. The hood turned toward her, and it spoke. Its voice wasn't heard. It was felt. Inside the skull, inside the teeth, vibrating the bones.
"Blood does not forgive."
Then from behind the altar, something rose. Not the horseman. Something older. The ground split open, revealing a pit of darkness that did not end. Hands, skeletal, charred and clawed, reached upward. And from them emerged a second figure, hooded, faceless, cloaked in robes of screaming ash. Its body pulsed with the symbols from the stone, glowing hot. The original Pact Keeper, Sir Moore. He hadn't died. He had become the seal. The two figures faced one another, one the sword, the other the seal. And Mira understood. The horseman was not a servant. He was a sentence. But it was the Pact Keeper who chose who would die, who pointed the blade. The Pact Keeper raised one blackened finger and pointed at Mira. "No!" Callan screamed, leaping forward. "It was me. It was never her." The Pact Keeper turned slowly. He pointed again, this time at Callan. The horseman moved, blade lifted, and in one clean, silent stroke, Callan fell. The sword didn't leave a wound. It emptied him. The life in his eyes vanished. His body crumbled like sand. Mira collapsed beside him, screaming, sobbing. The horseman returned to his mount. The Pact Keeper turned to the altar and stepped into the stone, which sealed behind him like flesh knitting shut. The fog lifted. The seal slept once more. Mira didn't know how long she stayed there. Days, maybe weeks. When she finally returned to Dreadmere, the fog had gone. The air was clear. The birds had returned. But something in her had changed. She bore the medallion now, around her neck, and sometimes in her dreams she stood beside the altar, not as the victim, but as the judge. The fog returned on the anniversary of her father's death. Not thick, not yet. A whisper of it at first, curling around fence posts and gravestones like a memory trying to find its shape. Mira knew it was a warning. She hadn't spoken in weeks. The village respected her silence. After the final trek back from the hollow seal, eyes hollow, clothes caked with soot, they stopped asking. Dreadmere was no longer haunted. It was hushed. Children no longer played near the chapel, and when the wind howled, everyone stayed inside. Mira had buried her father with his sword deep beneath the old yew tree, the medallion she kept around her neck, tarnished, warm to the touch. She hadn't tried to destroy it. She didn't dare, because sometimes at night it whispered, words not meant for ears.
Judgment is a seed. It grows.
3 months passed before the deaths resumed, not in Dreadmere, elsewhere. Villages to the west began reporting riders seen at night, headless, cloaked, burning red, livestock slaughtered, children missing, a man found in a well with his own spine twisted around his neck. The old stories returned like maggots. The Horseman walks again. Another war's coming. It's because of her. And so they came. Hunters, priests, knights. They arrived with torches in scripture, wearing holy armour, masks of gold and wax. One of them, Sir Audrin of Eblen, told Mira plainly, "We know who you are, Mira Callan. You carry the mark, the seal. You are the last remnant of the Pale Order." "I never took the oath," she replied, "but the Horseman follows you." "And who summoned him this time?" she asked. "I've been here." Silent, waiting. The priest behind the knight clutched his crucifix tighter. "It doesn't matter," Sir Audrin said. "Where he walks, you die." They burned her house, tried to kill her as she slept. But the fog came first. It poured from the chapel ruins thick and screaming, like it had waited beneath the stone for a taste of betrayal. The flames that licked the house were swallowed. The air grew cold. The horses of the knights turned on their masters, eyes rolling, vomiting blood. Sir Audrin ran. The priest fell to his knees and began tearing out his own tongue, as if to stop what he'd said from becoming truth. The Horseman came again that night, but he didn't raise his blade. He rode past Mira, into the woods, toward the west, where the pact had been renewed. The truth came in dreams. She saw the altar again. The hollow seal cracked open like a wound. Someone had summoned him, a new pact, a new judge, in some war-ravaged kingdom bleeding in the dark. The medallion burned on her chest, and Mira understood at last. She wasn't the target, she was the anchor. The Horseman's blade moved through guilt, but he needed a soul still bound to the origin, a line of blood, a bearer of silence, and now that bearer had a choice: follow or let the world burn. Mira left Dreadmere behind at dawn. The villagers watched her go. No one stopped her. Some whispered blessings, some crossed themselves. One child, a girl with red ribbons, gave her a black feather. "For luck," the girl whispered, "or death." She rode east, where kingdoms were falling, where thrones were soaked in betrayal, where kings made pacts they never understood, and at every turn, the Horseman rode ahead of her. She never saw him clearly, just the smoke trail, the ashen hoofprints, the scent of iron and old fire, villages empty, fields salted with bones. Once she found a shrine of helmets stacked into a tower, mouths filled with ash. Each time she came closer, each time the whispering in the medallion grew louder. They called him again. They fed the blade. Now you must carry it. At last, she reached the ruins of Vorellen, once a city of scholars and kings, now a crater of cinders. The fog here was permanent. The sky dripped, no crows, no vermin, just silence. And at the heart of it all, a new altar, built from bones, and a boy no older than 10, sobbing, chained to its base. Behind him stood a man, draped in crimson, bearing a book bound in flayed skin. "We summon the judgment," he said, smiling. "We sacrifice the weak." And still he came. "You fed him a child," Mira growled. "We followed the pale order," the man said. "Isn't that what you are? Isn't that why you came?" The fog parted. The horseman appeared, sword glowing, eyes alight. But he paused, looked at Mira, waited. The man in crimson raised his book, laughing. "I name the bearer," he shouted. "I name her Mira Callan, daughter of the deserter, blood of the original sin." And the sword turned toward Mira. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward and spoke the words she had heard in every dream. "I claim the burden." The horseman froze. The medallion cracked, and the sword fell from his hands. It hit the earth like thunder. Mira walked forward and lifted it, felt its weight, its hunger, its hate. But it did not burn her. It welcomed her. The crimson-robed man screamed. Too late. The blade sang through the air, and the altar cracked in two. Mira unchained the boy, told him not to look back, and as he ran she turned to the horseman and watched as he knelt for the first time. Mira understood what she had become. Not a victim, not a vessel, a warden. There would always be guilt, always be sin. But now the sword would not strike blindly. It would wait for her voice, and only her voice. The legacy of the rider was hers now, and judgment had found a name. Some nights the peasants of burning kingdoms speak of her, not a ghost, not a demon, but a woman with black eyes riding a horse with hooves that glow red. They say she carries a sword that never reflects the light. They say she speaks only once. And if you lie even to yourself, you do not speak again. Thank you for listening to Whispers in the Dark. If you'd like to support the show, head over to our Patreon, where you can sign up to one of 3 different tiers, or if you'd prefer to make a one-off contribution, maybe you'd like to buy me a coffee, or show support through our website at Buzzsprout. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube to stay up to date with new episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and more chilling tales. Music written and composed by Roman Dudchik. I've been the Dark Skald, your storyteller in the darkness. I'll be seeing you soon, and remember you've heard the whispers. But some doors, once opened, never truly close. If you feel something watching tonight, don't look back. We'll see you next time, if the dark lets you go.